organ transplantation. The hepatic abnormalities may be associated with transplantation of the liver and of other organs. Commonly, the pathologist is called for the frozen section for evaluation of the patient's primary disease before transplantation, in identification of the underlying donor liver disease like steatosis, cancer at the time of the allograft procurement, and recognition of a wide variety of complications following transplantation. So, what are the pre existing donor lesions? Marked macrovesicular steatosis carries the risk of primary graft dysfunction. Mild less than 30, moderate 30 to 60, or marked more than 60. Steatosis less than 30% can usually be transplanted safely. A period of liver dysfunction, rise in transaminases, prolonged PT may occur in these early post-transplant period and even lead to reduced graft survival. Most fat appears to be cleared during the first post-transplant week. Microvesicular steatosis, on the other hand, is not a contraindication. Primary or metastatic malignant tumor is a contraindication to liver transplantation. So, coming to the diseases of the transplanted liver: the preservation reperfusion injury, allograft rejection, various post-transplant complications, example surgical mishaps, hepatic artery portal vein thrombosis, bile duct problems such as dehiscence, leaks, necrosis, strictures, concrement formation, infection, drug reactions, opportunistic infections, recurrence of the original disease, and post-transplant lymphoproliferative disorders. What is preservation reperfusion injury? It is a non-immunological graft response resulting from the harvesting, ischemic preservation, transportation, and reperfusion of the donor liver. It appears early, first 2 weeks post-transplant, and regresses spontaneously over several weeks. Specimens are obtained at the time of the transplantation directly after revascularization of the graft, that is time zero biopsies. Surgical hepatitis is quite common, as in any surgical specimen consisting of clusters of neutrophils and scattered acidophil bodies. So another preservation injury, so-called functional cholestasis with bilirubinostasis in hepatocytes and canaliculi. This should be distinguished from cholestasis associated with acute rejection, drug toxicity, hepatitis, bile duct obstruction, or sepsis. Another lesion due to the preservation reperfusion injury is hepatocellular ballooning of variable degree, centrilobular or panlobular, often associated with bilirubinostasis and some hepatocyte dropout. The presence of all three features represents serious reperfusion injury, preservation reperfusion injury associated with a poor graft outcome. However, centrilobular hepatocyte loss in early post-transplant biopsies may also represent a rejection-related phenomenon, even if the typical post-portal tract changes are not prominent, and augmentation of immunosuppression should be considered. So, centrilobular hepatocyte loss is a very important feature. Coming to allograft rejection, is defined as the injury to the transplanted liver caused by immunologic reaction of the host. The preservation reperfusion injury was non-immunologic, whereas allograft rejection is immunological. Rejection has been classified as humoral, acute cellular, or chronic ductopenic. Coming to the humoral rejection, hyperacute or antibody-mediated rejection. It is rare. It develops in patients with preformed or subsequently formed antibodies to an ABO blood group incompatible donor. The antibodies react with the graft vasculature and cause endothelial damage and thrombosis within the first few hours, ultimately resulting in coagulative and hemorrhagic necrosis in few days. ISC for vascular C4D staining may be helpful in making the diagnosis. Coming to the next is the acute cellular rejection. It is the most common form of rejection. It is clinically significant rejection reported in 20 to 40% of patients, whereas the histological abnormalities are seen in up to 80% of protocol biopsies obtained around the first week after transplantation. Incidence of clinically significant rejection appears to be declining because of improved immunosuppression. And it develops within the first 3 weeks after transplantation, median range being 7 to 10 days. Results from a cell-mediated immune reaction directed at bile duct epithelium and endothelium of portal and centrilobular veins. Cellular rejection is characterized by a triad of portal infiltration, bile duct damage, and endotheliitis. Portal infiltration, bile duct damage, and endotheliitis. At least 2 of these 3 features is required for diagnosis. The portal infiltrate consists of a mixture of inflammatory cells, lymphocytes, immunoblasts, macrophages, plasma cells, neutrophils, and eosinophils. In some cases, eosinophils are abundant and represent a helpful diagnostic feature of rejection. May be focally or unevenly distributed. For this reason, it is recommended that at least you should see a minimum of 5 portal tracts. Occasionally, the infiltrate extends beyond the limits of the portal tracts and even leads to portal-portal bridging. So, what is endotheliitis? It can be present in the portal or the central veins. It consists of the supraendothelial or the subendothelial lymphocytes, endothelial damage, and lifting off of the endothelium from the underlying layers. Endotheliitis of the centilobular veins accompanied by necrosis of the centilobular hepatocytes and periportal accession of portal inflammatory infiltrate is severe cellular rejection. A less frequent form of cellular rejection with endothelial predominance appears as isolated central venoulitis without typical portal changes in adult and pediatric liver allograft recipients and may result in perivenular fibrosis and the veno-occlusive syndrome. We will discuss this later. Isolated central venulitis. Endotheliitis is not a constant feature, may be absent, especially in cases of acute rejection occurring beyond the early post-transplant period. Bile ducts are infiltrated by lymphoid cells, that is lymphocytic cholangitis. Bile duct epithelial damage is indicated by isonucleosis, vacuolization, stratification, dropout, irregularities, and we can do CK7 staining to help see the bile ducts. Coming to the differential diagnosis of the cholangitic, in differentiating the cellular rejection from the cholangitic lesions. Portal eosinophilia, endotheliitis, and necroinflammation favor rejection. Eosinophils, endotheliitis, necroinflammation means rejection. Whereas bilirubinostasis, neutrophilic infiltration, and ductular proliferation, periductal fibrosis and edema favor cholangitis. So, indeterminate, mild, moderate, and severe is the different grades for the acute cellular rejection. If the portal inflammatory infiltrate fails to meet the criteria for the diagnosis of acute rejection, you call it indeterminate. If the rejection is in the minority of the triads, generally mild and confined within the portal spaces, it is mild. If the infiltrate is expanding most or all of the triads, it is moderate. As above for moderate with spillover into the periportal areas and moderate to severe perivenular inflammation that extends into the hepatic parenchyma and is associated with centilobular necrosis. Additional features that are less consistently present include bilirubinostasis, some lobular inflammatory mononuclear infiltrate, and in severe cases, centilobular confluent parenchymal necrosis. Coming to the next important thing is a chronic rejection. Also, the other name is the ductopenic rejection. It is defined as immunological injury to the allograft that usually involves from severe or persistent acute cellular rejection and results in potentially irreversible damage to the bile ducts, arteries, and terminal hepatic veins and surrounding parenchyma. Terms such as the vanishing bile duct syndrome or ductopenic rejection are no longer recommended because bile duct loss is just one aspect of chronic liver rejection. So, important thing to remember is ductopenic rejection is equal to chronic rejection. Nevertheless, ductopenic rejection remains a frequently used synonym for chronic rejection. Clinical diagnosis of chronic rejection is suspected with the history of acute cellular rejection who develop progressive cholestasis. The minimal diagnostic criteria are presence of bile duct atrophy, pycnosis affecting a majority of the bile ducts with or without bile duct loss, convincing foam cell obliterative arteriopathy, or bile duct loss affecting more than 50% of the portal tracts. Since the arteries with pathognomonic changes predominate in the hilar region and are rarely present in needle biopsies, considerable significance is placed on the damage and loss of the small bile ducts. Other causes of bile duct injury and loss should reasonably excluded. Those include biliary tract obstruction and bile duct ischemia due to hepatic artery thrombosis. Chronic rejection mainly affects the portal tracts and the centilobular areas. Portal tracts, what happens? Initially bile duct damage, followed by loss of small bile ducts and small branches of the hepatic artery. Early bile duct changes may include uneven nuclear spacing, nuclear enlargement, and that is the dysplastic features appear. Expression of the P21 protein is increased in cholangiocytes during early chronic rejection and decreases with successful recovery. Replicative senescence accounts for the characteristic bile duct cytologic alterations used for the diagnosis of early chronic rejection. As the process advances, bile duct loss starts in the small interlobular ducts associated with decreasing portal cellular infiltrate, resulting in a burned out appearance of the portal areas. Bile duct loss should be present in at least 50% of the portal tracts to ensure a firm diagnosis of chronic rejection. Reliable counting of missing ducts requires adequate biopsy specimens containing at least 20 portal tracts and a demonstration of the ductopenia in several sequential biopsies. So you should see 20 portal tracts to call it chronic rejection or ductopenia. A remarkable feature is the absence of ductal reaction and of periportal fibrosis except in the presence of associated distal biliary obstruction. Possible causes are the absence of the vagal innervation in the transplanted liver, which is important for hepatic progenitor cell activation and increased cholangiocyte apoptosis. Early arterial lesions consist of accumulation of foamy macrophages, but these are not routinely seen in the peripheral needle biopsies. The macrophages and the mesenchymal cells in arterial lesions are of the recipient origin. In some cases of chronic rejection, inflammatory and foam cell lesions may also be observed in portal and hepatic venules, particularly in those cases with a more acute presentation, suggesting an overlap with the acute cellular rejection. Late arterial damage is mainly evaluated by the extent of loss of these structures. Arterial loss is considered present when less than 77% of the portal tracts contain hepatic artery branches. In the centrilobular area, the early lesions of chronic rejection are characterized by bilirubinostasis, sinusoidal foam cells, presumably related to chronic cholestasis, and subendothelial and perivenular mononuclear inflammation of the centrilobular vein, accompanied by zone 3 hepatocyte dropout, pigment-laden macrophages, and mild perivenular fibrosis. A transitional hepatitis, sometimes difficult to distinguish from mild hepatitis, may occur during the evolution to later stages of chronic rejection. Late chronic rejection may also feature several severe bridging perivenular fibrosis with at least focal central to central or central to portal bridging and occasional obliteration of the terminal hepatic venules. The two patterns of chronic rejection. So we have two patterns of chronic rejection: ductopenic, arteriopathic. The main features used to define the chronic rejection are not uniformly present in all cases. Bile duct loss can occur without arteriopathy and vice versa, and severe bridging centrilobular fibrosis may be present without significant bile duct loss or obliterative arteriopathy. So you can have centrilobular fibrosis. An individual patient may have late complications of one component, that is bile duct loss, but early features of another component, perivenular necrosis. Besides the two main patterns of chronic rejection, ductopenic and arteriopathy, the possibility of a chronic hepatitis-like pattern of chronic rejection has been postulated. Other complications: fatty liver disease, bile duct strictures, hepatic artery thrombosis alone or in combination with portal vein thrombosis, infections, drug-induced injury. Coming to the fatty liver disease, it's a frequent late complication of liver transplantation. The risk factors for post-transplant steatosis are post-transplant obesity, tacrolimus-based regimens, diabetes, hyperlipidemia, arterial hypertension. Alcoholic cirrhosis is the primary indication for transplantation. Pre-transplant graft steatosis. The release of fat globules causes fat microcysts, which resemble the pileosis hepatis. Coming to the next complication is the bile duct strictures. At the site of anastomosis or elsewhere due to ischemic cholangitis can be a cause of graft dysfunction. The classic histopathology of bile duct obstruction in native livers is also applicable to the diagnosis of biliary complications and transplants. So hepatic artery thrombosis, or alone or in combination with portal vein thrombosis, occurs more commonly in children. Consequences are ischemic injury, infarction. Coming to the next complication is the infection. Frequent complication it is, including CMV, EBV, adenovirus, herpes virus, and sepsis due to gram-negative bacilli. The next is the drug-induced injury. Several of the drugs in immunosuppression can cause hepatic damage. Azathioprine may cause hepatitis. Cyclosporin may cause canonical bilirubinostasis, hepatocyte ballooning, vacuolization of the bile duct epithelial cells. Next important topic is the recurrent disease. Can be controversial on liver biopsy because of the overlap with the rejection or post-transplant biliary stricture. The risk of graft loss from recurrent disease was greatest when compared to PBC in those transplanted for HCV, PSC, AIH. These are the having more recurrence. The overall risk of graft loss significantly greater in HCV, PSC, and AIH than PBC. The recurrent HBV may also cause typical change features of acute or chronic hepatitis, cirrhosis, and just the carrier state. In minority of cases, atypical features of disease develop in the form so-called fibrosing cholestatic hepatitis. The latter typically occurs early, is associated with rapidly progressive dysfunction, and characterized by ductal reaction, fibrosis, bilirubinostasis, hepatocellular ballooning with cell loss, and mixed inflammatory infiltrate. Fibrosing cholestatic hepatitis is associated with high viral load and occurs in other types of immunodeficiency states like HIV and in renal transplant patients. HCV recurrence is defined by the histologic injury is almost universal. HCV antigens can be detected in liver biopsies in the first few days after transplantation. In a small group of patients, graft injury is severe and may result in graft loss. The development of direct-acting antivirals sofosbuvir has dramatically changed the treatment options for recurrent hepatitis C after liver transplantation. Differentiation from acute cellular rejection is one of the most common and difficult problems in the assessment of post-transplant biopsies, since morphological features similar to those seen in rejection, such as bile duct damage and less generally acknowledged endotheliitis, portal eosinophils, and pericentral fibrosis, may also be due to hepatitis C. It may require sequential biopsies and grading of the lesions to document the progressive appearance of hepatitis C features. The portal infiltrate in recurrent hepatitis C is more prominently lymphocytic, less mixed. Bile duct infiltration of lymphocytes is milder. Endotheliitis is absent or minimal. Bile duct loss is absent, and fibrosis is more likely. So, more fibrosis, more lymphocytes means hepatitis C. In addition, the lobular parenchyma may show mild panlobular apoptotic changes, microvesicular steatosis. Recurrence of HCV often coincides with other causes of liver dysfunction such as residual reperfusion injury, biliary sludging, rejection, and autoimmune hepatitis. A granulomatous response to HCV occurs in a subset of patients after transplantation. Treatment with interferon alpha and ribavirin has been reported to trigger rapidly progressive chronic ductopenic rejection with or without first having the acute cellular rejection. But this is not an issue with the newer acting antivirals. Severe progressive cholestatic syndrome reminiscent of fibrosing cholestatic hepatitis and recurrent HBV has been reported with incidence of 2 to 10%, apparently due to the direct viral cytopathic effect in the context of high viral load. When studying the evolution of these cases, the first abnormality to appear is the recurrent hepatitis C and cholestasis. Fibrosis develops soon after and both continue to worsen until the point of allograft failure or patient death. Coming to the next is the recurrent primary biliary cirrhosis. In most patients, the antimitochondrial antibody persists after transplant and do not correlate with disease recurrence. The diagnosis of recurrent PBC is defined by histology, but the liver biopsy is the gold standard. Florid bile duct lesions and epithelioid granuloma are the most helpful features, although granulomatous cholangitis can be seen in hepatitis C. Florid bile duct lesions and epithelioid granulomas. Portal lymphoid aggregates and ductopenia are less helpful as they may occur in hepatitis C and rejection. Ductal reaction and progressive cholestasis are useful for the diagnosis of PBC recurrence, as those are not unusual in hepatitis C and rejection. So, ductal reaction, progressive cholestasis. The presence of plasma cells is the early marker of recurrent PBC. Coming to the next is the recurrent primary sclerosing cholangitis. Extremely difficult, impossible to distinguish from biliary strictures, sclerosing cholangitis, and allografts. Diagnosed by histology, imaging, excluding other non-anastomotic biliary strictures. The next is a recurrent fatty liver disease. It is common following liver transplantation for NASH. In one study, a recurrent fatty liver was seen in 70% of patients, of whom 25% had recurrent NASH, 18% had stage 2, 4 or greater fibrosis. The development of NAFLD even after liver transplantation for non-NAFLD cirrhosis is also being increasingly recognized. The pre-transplant risk factors include immunosuppression, higher age of transplant, male gender, smoking, the patient's and donor's pre-transplant BMI, pre-transplant diabetes, type of underlying liver disease resulting in transplantation like hepatitis C, cryptogenic cirrhosis, alcohol, and marital status. Coming to the recurrent autoimmune hepatitis, is based on the combination of several criteria. Portal and periportal inflammation, interface hepatitis containing plasma cells, although non-specific, is consistent with recurrent disease. The next is the de novo autoimmune hepatitis, also termed the post-transplant plasma cell hepatitis. It is defined as the clinical and histological features of AIH in patients who are not transplanted for that disease. This may be a particular diagnostic problem in hepatitis C patients who may develop plasma cell-rich hepatitis in the presence of HCV RNA. Some also consider this a histologic variant of rejection. Late changes in liver allografts, including fibrosis and inflammatory changes. In long-term pediatric liver transplant survivors, liver fibrosis is a common finding, as is the case in adult patients. Fibrosis was strongly related to transplant-related factors such as prolonged cold ischemia time, young age at the time of transplantation, high donor-recipient age ratio, and the use of partial grafts. Coming to the inflammatory lesions. In long-term liver grafts, including so-called central perivenoulitis corresponding to the centrilobular inflammation, sometimes not associated with portal inflammation, isolated central perivenulitis, and a non-specific chronic hepatitis termed the idiopathic post-transplant chronic hepatitis. So we have two inflammatory lesions, isolated central perivenulitis and the idiopathic post-transplant chronic hepatitis. The isolated central perivenulitis requires differentiation of other causes of centrilobular inflammation, including ischemia, rejection, hepatitis B, C, autoimmune, IPCH. It appears that the isolated central perineuritis most probably represents a form of late onset acute rejection. Then the idiopathic chronic hepatitis probably best interpreted as a form of late cellular rejection. Studies from Birmingham group say that this is associated with progressive fibrosis. Coming to the neoplastic disease, primarily include HCC and post-transplant lymphoproliferative disease. The primary risk factor for HCC is cirrhosis, developing after transplant. Post-transplant lymphoproliferative disease is mostly nodal and extranodal B-cell lymphoma because of a complication of immunosuppressive treatment. Other types of neoplasia are also more frequent in liver transplant recipients than compared to the controls.